Welcome to the Catholic Leadership Network podcast, where we connect the wisdom and experience of ministry leaders to the realities of ministry in the trenches. We journey with ministry leaders through all the hidden aspects that help us to become fruitful ministers. Here at the Catholic Leadership Network podcast, we discuss the stuff that no one told you about Catholic ministry and strive to help ministry leaders succeed from the beginning. Our hosts are Christy Cabanis, the Director for Missionary Discipleship for the Diocese of Cleveland, and Sarah Jarzembowski, the Director for Marriage and Family Life at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Parish in Crofton, Maryland. Please show your support for our efforts by clicking like and subscribe and commenting below. And now here are Sarah and Christy. Starting. No. This is good. This is good, everybody, because we need this. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Catholic Leadership Network podcast, where we talk about all the things you never knew about ministry, and to help you figure it out from the beginning. So we're here today with Joan Duncan, and just realized I didn't get a bio. That's totally okay. So I asked if the two of them would just introduce and, how they got to know each other. And then Christy's like, wait, I don't remember.
Because I've known Joan for a long time.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Christy. It's been a long time.
Okay, so Joan, first off, I know that my brain went completely blank. I know exactly where the parish is in Harrison City, Pennsylvania, but tell us your name and your title.
I'm Joan Duncan. I'm the Director of Faith Formation at St. Barbara Parish in Harrison City.
Yes. It's very near to a farm that I used to go to called Shram's that closed down sadly. But that's slowly but surely disappearing. Shram's. They're selling it off, and we have lots of housing projects going up instead of farms. It's pretty sad. Yeah. What I know about Joan is that I know that you were a teacher, and I think it was a Catholic school teacher for a long time before you got into like ministry, because I'm not going to say that being a Catholic school teacher is not ministry. It is. But I think that we met each other whenever I very first was getting started, because we got invited to some kind of a group meeting somewhere along the way. And I don't remember when Joan decided that she thought I was cool and it was okay to hang out with me, but I was very excited about it. And she's been a mentor to me and a guiding force, and the type of person that you can always go to for real talk. And she has no questions in her mind about what it is to be a lay woman in the church. So sorry, any guys that are listening. But I do think that there's something to be said about the power of lay women and what they're bringing to the table, and then also what it is to sort of get yourself into these positions. But she's been a diocesan consultant over the years. She's from the Diocese of Greensburg, Pennsylvania, which is like whoop whoop, sort of like my old stomping grounds. And so we're super excited to have you here. Joan, what else should I be adding to this bio?
Well, I was a Catholic school teacher for the diocese. I've worked for the Diocese of Greensburg for almost 41 years in different capacities.
Wow. And she started when she was 12.
Yes, thank you. 18 years, I was a Catholic school teacher in 3 different schools, finishing up my teaching career as a kindergarten teacher at St. Margaret Mary's Church or school in Lower Burrell. And at that point, they were merging all the schools and making them regional, and they did not need 3 kindergarten teachers. So the pastor said to me, hey, listen, I really need a formation director, and you have the qualifications that I'm looking for. Will you consider staying around and doing that? So that was in 2002. So I've been doing parish formation since then.
Wow.
In 2014, I moved to St. Barbara's. So it's almost 11 years. It'll be 11 years come June, so a couple months. I adore what I do. When you talked about lay women, we spent this whole year talking about our call to holiness. That's what our theme was, and we broke it out for each month. And I could talk to you about, how that all works. And one of the things we talked about was really listening to what God's call is for you. Mm-hmm. And are you doing, God gives you all the gifts and talents that are necessary to do what he needs you to do. So as I was exploring this with families, to the kids, are you Are you listening? Are we focused on just what's going to make us the most money, or are we focused on really what God has given us the qualities to do? And I am a firm believer that what I do is my vocation, and I am totally doing what God has called me to do. Now that sounds very flowery and wonderful. And there are many, many times that I come home thinking, really? Like, I think maybe I'm done. I don't know. But, deep down, I still know that I'm doing what God had intended me to do. So.
Awesome.
Thank you for being honest about that and sharing that sometimes you're like, am I really supposed to still be here?
Yeah.
I'm also a parish ministry leader, and there are days that I come home and it's like, what am I doing? What am I even doing?
And it's the external forces, I would say. It's the things that I really don't have any control over. Yeah. Working with the families and the parishioners in the parish, I love that.
Yeah.
It's that next level up. That's a lot of changes are going on. Christy, you probably wouldn't even recognize the diocese right now. And so it's those external factors that you can't change. You just have to keep plugging along and doing what you're doing. At least that's how I look at it.
Yeah. I'm sure I do not know that of which you speak.
Me neither. Just, for all the diocesan folks that are out there. Yeah. I don't know what you're talking about being frustrated every day and whatever. The good thing yesterday morning, I was at a PCL, like morning of reflection kind of a day. And it was great. It was really like a pump you up, but it was this reminder, Joan, like you said, like there was time for us to do the little dump, but then there was like, where's the hope? How are you getting back up again? What keeps you at it? And you said it already, like, why do you stay then? And it's the vocational call. And also for the families and the people that we're affecting in ministry, like, but the other thing that this speaker said, which I thought was powerful, is like, perhaps, and I think it's fun to share it here, is perhaps the struggles are what God is doing in you right now to prepare you for the plan that you can't see that he has in mind. I know,
Christy. I don't like when you talk like that.
He can move on. I mean, he can, I'm good.
John's like, that's enough.
That's right. Exactly.
I am stretched and pulled enough, Lord. I'm good. Yes. Thank you so much. Go on to your next project, please. This house needs a break. Put the brakes on. So Joan, one of the reasons why we asked you to be on here, besides your infinite wisdom and expertise, is particularly with regard, because you do a lot with whole community catechesis and family faith formation. And so we really wanted to talk about that with you today. So one of the first questions that we have for this season is like, what materials are you finding that you're going to, like, what are your major core resources that you're looking at whenever you're doing, like, where did you get the gumption to want to do this?
Actually, back in 2002, John Roberto, who I'm sure you all know.
He's been on the show, yes, throwback.
Came to the diocese and introduced his Generations of Faith concept of family faith formation. And the pastor that I worked for at the time is very, well, he's retired now, but he was very innovative and was looking for something new and different. The old drop your kids off CCD wasn't flying for him anymore, and he wanted something new and different. So we went to the workshops and we really jumped in with 2 feet in the whole Generations of Faith concept with John. Our parish became kind of like a pilot program in the diocese. And I went to a national certification, like training that John had in Connecticut. I can't remember what year, maybe 04, 05, 06. I can't remember when he had it. Myself and a couple others in the diocese, we went for this training so that we could, in fact, introduce and train parish leaders and that would be interested in doing that. Nice. I will say that concept never really took off, which is a shame, but because I've not done anything but family formation since 2002.
Amazing.
I have not used a textbook. I have not, I just haven't. When I moved from St. Margaret Mary's to St. Barbara, the intent was to bring the programming that I was doing at St. Margaret Mary's to St. Barbara's. The priest at the time, this is just a little funny story that I like to tell. Their formation director left in January. In February, I applied for the job. Father Ken, Christy, I'm sure you know him, was pastor at St. Barbara's at the time. Mm-hmm. I went for the interview, got hired with the understanding that I was not going to start until June when the catechetical year was over. I'd finish out sacraments and all of that. And in the meantime, the priest changes were happening. Mm-hmm. So our pastor at St. Margaret Mary's called us in and on a Friday afternoon at 3:00. Nothing ever good happens at a Friday afternoon staff meeting at 3:00 ever. Oh. So he called us in, and it was not to be unexpected. He was there for 16 years, built a new church. We knew he was going to be gone. So the announcement, I'm being transferred. Okay. That's sad, but okay. Obviously the next question is, well, who's coming to St. Margaret Mary? And he looked straight across the table at me and said, Father Ken Zaccanini. And I said, excuse me? No. Father Ken's, that's where I'm going, Mm-hmm. No. And he just laughed because that's the kind of priest he was. And I said, okay, I don't care about anything else. Tell me who's going to St. Barbara's. That's what I want to know now, And I had worked with Father Michael on different committees, so I knew him, and I was very comfortable at that point. But so when I moved to St. Barbara's, it was kind of a culture shock for them. They had only known Saturday morning. Oh, and they did it for 3 hours, which that was the first thing I changed. I was like, no. 3 hours, that's too long.
That is too long.
I kept it the Saturday morning for a year just to kind of see how it went.
Yeah.
And then I moved into the family based where the entire family comes. My sacramental preparation is done that way as well with the second graders. Families are intergenerational. So I'm kind of a firm believer in that. I think it's a little more difficult to find materials and to find publishers who will, it's getting better. Mm-hmm. But the publishers, we're kind of into it and then not so much anymore. Center for Ministry Development that John worked for and published the Generations of Faith stuff, they sold that. I believe this is how it went. And there is a website called Fashioning Faith that I spend a lot of time using. It's a subscription, but it's very inexpensive. It has a lot of what Center for Ministry Development, what John Roberta, what the Generations of Faith stuff detailed. So it's what used to be in binders is now all online. So you just click on and you find the theme or whatever it is that you're trying to focus on, and you're able to pull down, whole community opportunities for the families to do all together, breakout opportunities if you want to do it. So I do a combination of both. We meet twice a month. The first session, the family stays together, and I sort of introduce the concept that we're going to be focusing on that month. And then the second time they gather, we have a breakout sessions that start with preschool, 4-year-old preschool through 5th grade. And then the adults have a session as well. So everybody's learning about the same topic, just on their own individual levels. Right. So I kind of have the best of both worlds. I do have the families working together, to help the parents understand their role, give them the solid materials to take that concept home with. And then the catechists have an opportunity to break it down a little more closely within the age level so that they're able to understand it. You know, what a fifth grader is going to be taught is a little different than what a preschooler is going to be taught.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I miss those binders though. I'm a paper girl. I like paper and filing through, but the clip art, you're right. We gotta do away with clip art.
Christy, you'll appreciate this. I've been going through my office and I just finally got rid of the Taste and See binders that are all over my office.
Oh,
I asked for permission. I said, Father, can I please get rid of this since there's like 72 new renditions of it? And he said yes. So
yeah. I have some original documents of that. So I keep them in my office now. Yeah, that's I feel like that's good stuff though. For anybody that's wondering what in the world is Taste and See, it was our the diocesan sacramental primarily, right?
Yeah, like the whole curriculum or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's been again new renditions of all of that since a couple different times now.
Yeah. So guess what, guys? That means that at some point you can throw away the old diocesan policies. Exactly. That's been a conversation, actually. Blaspheme. I know. The other is that I just had somebody say, like, they were talking about, like, when do you follow the diocesan policy? And then it's awesome whenever there's diocesan stuff where some of them might be saying, I've never seen anything like what you're talking about in writing. And then other people are like, yeah, and that's the policy and we can't change it on the same staff.
Right.
Sorry. That never would happen. That's just a joke, guys. This is a silly made up story that I just told. Sorry.
Boy, is that common.
Anyway.
It is so common though that, you know, and then it's like, well, where did you see that? Okay, let me see if I can find it again. And all I can find is the paper.
Well, and I'm going to just say as a military person, like that is the thing that got beat into our heads is that you don't just say, because my shipmate said so, you have to say, like, where did that come from? And so I used to even ask my old boss, who had been the vicar general for like 20 years at one point and had a PhD from Notre Dame in theology, like, no, Monsignor, where am I going to find that? Because it was not okay for me to just be like, well, my boss said so.
That's so important. I think that asking questions like, where can I find that information, is important. Number one, it really does bring forth transparency. Like, oh no, this is just family lore that we've passed down from person to person. You know, or this is the way it's always been done. Who knows where it came from? And it kind of brings up, well, why do we do this then?
Yeah.
You know, is this necessary? And I really like that. And I also like being able to take my, you know, national directory or my, you know, catechism, and say, look, this is where I get this from. Right. And I like showing that to parents so that they know that it's not made up, that I'm not making something up. I'm reading it right from here. Right. Grace cannot be earned. Right. You can't.
Well, the other part of that is I think that there's some context as well that you can read up and find out about that will help you be a better leader and a better formator too. That like then you find out why this is necessary or, you know, the background behind what draws us to this. That a lot of times is like pulling from like scripture, previous writings of the church, all of that sort of thing that helps us to know like, we're not just doing things out of thin air. We're doing them for a reason and a purpose. What do you, Joan? So like you said, you mentioned fashioning faith and that you're kind of following that as a model, but how are you structuring your year then? Like, how do you know what to do? Oh, I didn't know that was a trick question.
Love that. That's a great response.
I pick an overarching theme. That will kind of set the tone for the whole year. And then I break that theme up into monthly installments. And then we look at each month and how we're going to tackle that overarching theme. It was Father Michael's wish that we looked at a call to holiness, which is what the theme was that we were just finishing up for this year. That was a challenge for me because there's not a whole lot and there's a lot of material, but to be able to bring it down to a preschooler's level so I spent a good bit of the summer just kind of picking out different themes from that. We looked at discipleship. We looked at what it means to listen. One of the fun activities we did with the families was we talked about the story of Eli and why is it missing? The Bible story where he's
being called by Samuel.
There you go.
Yeah.
And watched a video on it and then talked about how Samuel figured out it was God, and Eli, so I was trying to come up with an activity that the kids could do and then take home to make it meaningful. So I'm looking on Oriental trading. I mean, I'm all, what kind of craft can we do, whatever. And my coworker says, why don't you just have them decorate a pillowcase? They could take it home.
Oh, that's so cute.
And then as they're sleeping, so I fashioned the whole evening around decorating this pillowcase, and I have the fabric markers and all that kind of stuff. And, when we're sleeping or when we're quiet, that's when we can hear God the most. So, put this on your bed, whatever. So I try to find very concrete ways to continue to keep the theme going.
Love that.
So, it's just as we were ending, I would remind the kids, how many of you still have your pillowcase? How many are you still using? And they all put their hands up. And, so each one got to do their own. Sometimes it's just a family activity that we do, or that they do one, but a lot of times I'll do things that everybody gets to do. John Roberta's philosophy was that you took the pillars of the catechism so that you had a 5 or 6 year rotation. You did a year on creed and you did a year on prayer and morality and whatever. And then within that 5 or 6 years, the kids for the most part would be moving on. So you always you could start again. So maybe what the kids learned in first grade about morality or the 10 Commandments or whatever it may be, by the time they were in 6th grade, it would be a different perspective of it because they're at a different age. Mm-hmm. One of the things I really like to also continue is that it's not just in my, we call our program Foundations of Faith. It's not just in the Foundations of Faith program that we do this, but youth ministry continues the theme that the parish has looked at. So nice. Middle school and high school, while they're doing it in their youth ministry way, not necessarily, a family-based way, they are doing it. And we try to do a few adult things separate from formation, so that so it was kind of like a parish-wide theme. That doesn't always happen. This year was a little different because it was something that Father has been preaching on and talking about and really wanted to hammer home, talking about what it meant to be, are we using our gifts and talents and charisms and all those things, all those buzzwords that we use, or how do we teach people how to do that? One of the things I do send home, you were talking about scripture, and all those things. I try to find quality, easy to read, easily digestible, not like a whole document.
Right.
I send home with the parents each month with some other activities for the kids to work on, but so that parents have something good, that they can take to the ball field when it's practice and they got to sit there for an hour and watch their kids, or go pick them up or sit in the car or whatever, that they can pull it out and read it. Do they actually do that? I'm not real sure, but hopefully, there's something, or I try to include a little prayer or whatever. I did have a parent say to me, I love those little prayers. I stick them on my refrigerator that you send, so that it just kind of reminds me in my craziness, busyness of the day. So it's trying to get for the parents, the opportunity, because I'm sure you've all found that there's a lacking of understanding, not just young, but even, I would say, honestly, I'm a lot older than you guys, but I am a product of Catholic education my entire life, but did not really learn my faith until I went to college. And I'm that post-Vatican II, like, we got to figure out what we're doing kind of a thing. And I think, I'm a little biased, but I think traditional CCD, it just isn't the answer. Dropping your kids off, plopping them down in front of a book after they've spent all day in school. And again, that's just my opinion, but yeah. I do teach some of the catechist certification courses for the diocese. And when I talk to them about, put the book off to the side, you don't need to, the look on their face is exactly like, it's like, what are you talking about? We have to. I'm like, no, really, you don't. You can figure out what you wanted to talk about, what the theme of the chapter is, and do it with that. So
I used to, whenever I was a catechist, I used to use the book as a threat, actually. I would be like, guys, we need to behave so we can do the fun things. Otherwise, we could just open up the book and read out of it if that's what you, no, Miss Christy, no, that was fourth graders. So yeah, nobody wants that. Well, Joan, what influences how you choose these themes? Are you looking at catechetical year? Or are you thinking about what do the people need? Or does your pastor have?
This past year was the first year he really has kind of insisted. He's usually left it to me. So usually I do look at the pillars of the church and look at those. We'll do a whole year on creed so that they get an understanding of what they actually are saying and believing. Or believing what they're saying at the Sunday Mass, or morality. So I try to pick those pillars and then rotate them. Sometimes something, if there's a special thing happening, like years ago, the year of St. Paul was a overarching theme in the church. So we did our formation on St. Paul's letters and I try to bring in as much of the church direction as possible, when they have something. The Jubilee year, I think, would be a little difficult to do a whole year on. I mean, you could pull out each individual ones that they're celebrating, but it doesn't always, their year doesn't always line up with a catechetical year either. So, they've kind of,
yeah.
Like the Jubilee year started and it's like, oh, we could talk about this, but not,
they're following the calendar year rather than maybe a school model or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get you 100%. What about, I did hear you say, you give the parents some of these resources so that that you're doing your due diligence to try to offer them ways that they can keep encouraging with the faith. What do you do about families that sort of fall off the bandwagon? Is there a way to help people not feel excluded or shamed for their lives being ridiculous or their own resistance to faith? Are there ways to help teach them how to pick back up again when they've quote unquote failed?
I think being pastoral and welcoming is the key to all of that.
Yeah.
I am not one to adhere so closely to what are perceived norms in the diocese about how many years they have to be in formation to receive a sacrament, kind of a thing. That's one of those things that I searched high and low and could not find anywhere that everyone has perpetuated for as long as I've been doing. But anyhow,
that's a conversation for offline.
Yes. When someone calls me, if a young couple calls me and they've had a baby and they want to have their child baptized, which honestly, I feel like that's all I've been doing lately, is having baptism seminars, and we're baptizing a slew of babies, which is wonderful.
Good. Yeah.
But, instead of, we talk and it's a requirement that they come in and have a seminar, at least for their first child. And, as we're talking and they talk about, well, I haven't really been, I need to get back into it. This is important to me. It's how you approach that. I look at them and go, that's typical. It is what what you do. Many young adults not walk away, but they kind of fade out a little bit, and then they come back in when they're have a family and they realize it's something that they want to continue to do. So I do the same thing when kids are getting ready for their sacraments. I would have loved to have seen you when your child was in preschool, kindergarten, or first grade. But you know what? You're here now, and we're going to make this be the best year so that you're going to sit back and say, this wasn't so bad. Maybe we can make it a priority, a little more of a priority than we have been doing.
Yeah.
I think invitation is the key.
It's important for people to know that God is revealing himself to them right now in this very specific moment. And that in itself is important, right? That in itself is a spiritual, faith-filled connection. And that's grace. The reason you are here is God's abounding gratuitous grace. I love that. In the Catechism, it's called it gratuitous grace. You don't deserve it. It's there. You're here. There's purpose. And we're so glad you're here. I'm really glad to hear you talking in such a pastoral way. I've had so many parents, specifically mothers, that just sit there at the end of the day in our gatherings, just so tired. And they're like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm like, you know what? Hang on. Sorry. We're not doing that anymore. You are doing everything that you can, and I have no doubt about that. You are doing what you can when you can. There is no behind. There is no failure. You are exactly where you're supposed to be. And when I say that there's no behinds, like this can be done at any time, there's such a breath of relief. So thank you for saying that.
I think,
go
ahead.
No, finish.
I think that, like for our community in particular, I need to know the scope of what's going on in our community. Recreation football starts in August for the Pee Wee little kids and doesn't finish up to November for the most part. And it is all consuming. So I have to adjust my expectations so that the family's like, okay, so we really can do both, yes, please, the minute I tell a 7-year-old, you absolutely have to come to this and you can't go to the football playoffs that your team has worked for all year long, they're never going to come back into church again. Wow. So, I think there needs to be a pastoral approach to the way we do things.
Yeah. So we're coming up to time, Joan. So we've got about 2 minutes left, and I just wanted to ask you our favorite question. What do you wish you knew when you started in ministry 2 days ago?
2 days ago.
I wish I would have known. School administration and parish administration are very different, and I wish I would have known the intricacies of, how do I say this and be diplomatic, of doing what your pastor wants that might not necessarily be what the diocese says you're supposed to be doing. That
what?
And just the interaction. I mean, I've always interacted with parents, so that part wasn't very different, but just for us, it's the different committees in the church who think their committee is the priority. And I'll be very thankful when Lent is done and the fish fry is finished this Friday. Let me just end with that. Yes.
You wish that you would have known the importance of the fish fry.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Because we've always done it that way.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I don't have any tattoos, but that might be one that I decide to just.
I honestly think that that's going to be the new Catholic joke is the fish fry.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yeah. I'm trying to get you to Jesus. You're worrying about raising money. Not that raising money is not important, but yes, I was nastily told that I thought I ran this parish, but I don't. By a fish fry committee member. Yes.
Yeah. I know that person. I know
because
that.
You all have one in your
own parish.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Sadly, I know them. I know them too.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate you adjusting your schedule to be able to do it on a day that I was able to. And
there we go. Glitch in the matrix, folks. We're just finishing up here with Joan, and so glad that you're here, and thank you for sharing all those things that you wish you knew from the beginning, and your thoughts on family faith formation. I do think that there's a lot more places that are going towards this, so hearing your ups and downs and ins and outs is really, really helpful to somebody doing family formation. I feel seen. Thank you.
Yeah.
And really appreciate all of your insights, everyone. So thank you for joining us. This is great. I'm always so glad to meet new people in ministry and look forward to when our paths cross in real life, IRL, as the kids say these days. Gosh, I'm old. I just said as the kids say these days. Oy.
Yes.
That happens.
I'm ashamed.
However, I am older than both of you, so I understand completely.
Not as much as
I think barely, yeah.
You'd be surprised.
Probably not as much as you think. So anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for joining this on this week's Catholic Leadership Network podcast. Hopefully you learned something new today and something that you can use in your ministry. Please click like, share, subscribe, and send this along to other people in your ministry, other people in your networks. It really helps us to get the word out about what we do.
Yeah.
And to gather new people into our network and onto the podcast. So thank you, everybody, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining today's podcast. Please click the like and subscribe. And if you find this important to the conversations you're having in your local ministry, please share and join the conversation in the comments below. Thank you, and we'll see you next time on the Catholic Leadership Network podcast.